Hi everyone, today I am going to be going through your abuse lesson and explaining the assignment that you will be doing. Feel free to follow along so that you have a better understanding about the different types of abuse. I'm going to show you some ads that are portrayed on billboards and in the public and things like that. And then I just want you to think about what this billboard message is trying to say. So right here it says, "Look at me, don't turn a blind eye." So go ahead and think for a couple seconds. What do you think this billboard is trying to portray to the user? I'm assuming my interpretation of this billboard is, look at me, look at all of these bruises. Like, don't turn a blind eye to the abuse. Like, it could be emotional, but it could turn into physical. So don't turn a blind eye to what's truly happening. Next, it says, not all scars are visible. If you look closely, you can see the people inside of their, in her brain, it has like an outline of a person. So what do you think this is trying to say? Just think about it for a second. This is just trying to portray to the viewer that not all scars are visible. Yes, there is physical abuse like we saw on the last slide, but there's also emotional abuse that is just as harmful. He has his mother's eyes. So what do you think this is trying to say? A lot of times people will say child abuse. Obviously, this is a child and it says he's getting beat. The saying he has his mother's eyes is probably referencing that the mother might be beat as well. Judge, punished, deprived, hazed, forced, abused, bruised. Hazing isn't tradition. No, decide, act. A lot of people aren't sure about this type of abuse, but you'll learn about it today. This is hazing. This one, it's on a bus or a train station or something, and it says, victims are people just like you and me. So what do you think that this public service announcement is trying to kind of say to the person that can see it on this bus ride? My assumption is victims are people just like you and me. There's people that are sitting in our classroom that might have been victims of abuse or know someone who has been abused. And just because you see how they are on the outside, like, there are many people who are vulnerable to being a victim. This one's kind of funny. Think about it. So obviously he's like screaming at her and like his words are pulling her hair. So it's just trying to say like words hurt too. Like what he is saying is hurting her, even though he's not like physically hurting her. Emotionally, he is. So what is abuse? It's treating a person or an animal with cruelty. Some signs of someone who is abusive: they're controlling, they're obsessive, aggressive, needy, they have difficulty controlling their anger, they use forces or threats, and they make demands. First type of abuse we're going to talk about is physical abuse. This is a violent act that results in trauma or injury. So something physical happens to you. Dumping hot water on someone, burning someone with a lighter, breaking bones, slapping, hitting, shaking, or shoving someone, pulling someone's hair, isolation or confinement. That is considered physical because you're depriving them of things that they need to be healthy, which ties into the next one, depriving a person from eating or drinking. If you're isolating them, you are not giving them the physical needs that they need to be met. Next is emotional or verbal abuse. This is when someone hurts you in other ways that doesn't include touch. It's often difficult to define or prove emotional or verbal abuse, but some examples are saying or doing things to upset or frighten the other person. So maybe you're like driving really fast in the car. You're doing that to cause an emotional reaction. Controlling finances, ways you spend your money, swearing at someone or calling them names, someone who orders you around and treats you like a servant, using guilt trips or shaming to get their way, and throwing objects but not at you. Once again, they're not physically hurting you, but they're doing something to affect you emotionally. The next is sexual abuse. This is an intentional sexual contact characterized by use of force, physical threat, or abuse of authority. This is usually happening when a victim does not or cannot consent. When we're talking about sexual abuse, these things are typically hands-on. You're actually doing something with your hands to abuse that person. Some examples would be inappropriate sexual contact. So that would be like groping someone's breast or boobs or butt. Next is exchange of reward with sexual favor. So they're bribing you to do something to them sexually for a reward. Unwanted hugs or kisses, being touched in a way you're not comfortable with without consent in any sexual manner, unwanted pictures taken, etc. So there are the sexual abuse examples. Now let's talk about sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is unwanted sexual advances. So you're requesting sexual favors or other physical conduct of a sexual nature. If it is not happening physically, it is harassment. That is why sexual abuse is hands-on, sexual harassment is hands-off. So some examples would be sharing sexually inappropriate images, inappropriate sexual gestures. So that would be doing things like asking someone to do something inappropriate to you by doing like a gesture. So a lot of people will do this and put their like tongue in between it. That's an example. This would be an example. Those are inappropriate sexual gestures. Demanding or requesting sexual favors, which makes that person feel uncomfortable, making remarks about a person's body, telling dirty jokes, and then bra snapping or pantsing also fits into this category. The next one is neglect. This is when your parents or caretakers fail to provide the needed age-appropriate care. So some examples of neglecting a child would be leaving a child alone, not giving a child attention, withholding education, so not sending them to school. That's why you get tracked if you don't do your attendance. Not providing food, clothing, or water. These are the basic things we need to survive. Maybe having medical care. Maybe you have lack of medical care or improper medical care. I don't know if you've heard of Gypsy Rose. It's the girl who her mom convinced her that she was disabled, and so she didn't walk. She was in a wheelchair, but come to find out her mom made it all up. Soiled undergarments, so not changing someone's diaper, and those are all examples of that. The last is domestic violence. This is an aggressive behavior that happens within the home. It typically involves the abuse of a spouse or partner. So sometimes people get confused on domestic violence because it is a combination of the three types of abuse. There's physical abuse in a domestic violence situation. They're hitting them. There's sexual abuse. They're forcing them to have sex. There's emotional abuse. They're calling them names. But when it happens within a household, that's when it's referenced as domestic violence. So the question is, if someone's in a relationship where they're being violent, why doesn't that person leave? Number one, if you are in a relationship and they make $20K and you make $20K, together you make $40K. If you get out of that relationship, you are cutting your income in half. Number one, if you have children involved, that could be a second reason. You don't want to get the children involved. You'd rather just keep your family together. Maybe you don't have any other place to go. There are resources out there, but you might feel like there's nowhere to go. There is a fear that who they report to won't provide them with the help they need. If you go to someone for a problem and they have to bring it up to the person, like police, for example, then they confront your husband about it or whatever the situation is, then that could be kind of detrimental, because what if they bring it up and you have to go back into that home? You're putting yourself in a more dangerous situation. Maybe you have a feeling that things will change. That would be another example. The last one is hazing, which is the one that I think that you are most unfamiliar with, but once I bring it up, it'll make more sense. This is basically an initiation ceremony. You're doing things involving harassment or abuse used as a way to kind of initiate a person into a group, to make them feel like they're part of the group. They have to do this first. This is very common, or was very common. It's monitored now in Greek life, so like sororities and fraternities. And a lot of times if you're on a new team or in a new club, they will tease you and do things related to this as well. So some examples would be forced activities to prove your worth, forced required consumption of alcohol, requirement to eat spicy foods, enduring hardship. So maybe they do make you stay awake for long periods of time, do physical labor, isolation, beatings, paddlings, or other physical acts. There's a combination of different types of abuse in this category. Maybe they're making you do illegal activities like underage drinking or stealing. So I'm going to show you this video, if it'll work. And it's basically examples of hazing acts. Lovely. Wait a second. I'm going to go ahead and play this video. It is a little bit different, but it does give you some examples of hazing stories. So what they did to initiate these people.
Andrew Losey attended Dartmouth, a private Ivy League research university located in Hanover, New Hampshire. In 2008, he pledged to the fraternity of Sigma Alpha Epsilon and had to endure some incredibly horrific acts for the sake of brotherhood. In his 2012 memoir, Confessions of an Ivy League Frat Boy, he hoped to shed some light on the dark activity that went on during initiations. He says that pledges had to swim in a kiddie pool filled with vomit, urine, fecal matter, semen, and rotten food products. They were also made to eat omelets made of vomit, chug cups of vinegar, which in one case caused a pledge to vomit blood, and even drink beer poured down fellow pledges' ass cracks. By the end of his pledge term, Andrew Losey had vomited so much that the enamel on his teeth had mostly burned away. In 1994, 25-year-old Michael Davis attended Southeast Missouri State University and pledged to the fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi. On one evening, the journalism student suffered a merciless attack from several chapter members as part of a hazing ritual. During the brutal beating, Michael Davis collapsed. He was then thrown in the back seat of a car. The fraternity members stopped to get food at a Taco Bell instead of driving Davis to the hospital that is located directly across the street. They then drove the unconscious man home and put him in bed. When he started foaming at the mouth, the fraternity brothers called 911 and lied to the rescue workers by telling them that Davis had been injured playing football. He had broken ribs, a lacerated kidney, a lacerated liver, and bruises all over his chest, neck, back, and arms. He died from bleeding in his brain. 7 members of the fraternity eventually pled guilty or were convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
All right, so those are just 2 examples. They are in fraternities. Obviously, it doesn't always happen in fraternities, but it is a good example of kind of what's going on. Those are just some examples of hazing. So then you would do a knowledge check in class where I would ensure that you knew the difference between the different types of abuse. These are examples. So if you want to kind of practice, no matter how high Maddie's grades were or how many awards she won, her parents were never satisfied. They would call her stupid if she came home with a grade of less than 85. They would attend a basketball game and then spend the entire car ride home suggesting how she could have done better. So what type of abuse is this? It would be emotional abuse because they are doing things to hurt her emotionally. They are criticizing her. They are picking apart her performance, all of those things. Next, Andrea and Tommy are dating. A few months ago, he began pressuring her to have sex. She wasn't sure if she wanted to, but Tommy said if she loved him that she should want to. Tommy starts to tell her that if she doesn't have sex with him, he will break up with her. So Andrea gives in, even though she didn't want to, because she didn't want to lose Tommy. So what type of abuse would this be? It's going to be sexual abuse because the act actually happened. It says Andrea gives in even though she didn't want to. So the act actually happened. Joey lived with his mom. His mom was rarely home and did not have a job. He was the one that made sure there was food to eat and clothes to wear. Sometimes he would try to find odd jobs to help with rent or grocery money and would have to miss school because of it. Failure of parents to provide the proper care. What type of abuse is that? It's neglect. Moving on. Sally walked home from school. Each day she would pass a group of guys who were hanging out. They would whistle at her, make sexual gestures, and make comments about her body. This is sexually related. All they're doing is whistling, doing gestures, and making comments. No act is happening. Therefore, this is not sexual abuse. It is sexual harassment. Sam's family is a little different. His mother controls everything in the house. Every family member, including his dad, has to ask his mom if they want to make plans, go somewhere, or have someone over. She controls all the money. His dad gives the mom the paycheck, and she controls what the money's spent on, regardless of what the other family members want or need. This could be emotional. A lot of people say emotional abuse. However, it's happening within the household with a spouse, with the kids. So it would actually be domestic violence, okay? A group is planning an initiation ceremony for this year's freshmen that encourage drinking games, swearing, and condescending language. They say it's all in the name of good time and bonding. However, you saw the pictures and you knew things looked out of hand. What would this be? They're planning an initiation. The word we're looking for is hazing. Okay, so very good. Hopefully you understand the different types of abuse. There will be questions about them on your test. Sorry that this video was so long, but I did want to go through them. You will be doing an assignment just to confirm that you understand and just kind of get a different perspective. What you'll do is you'll go to Canvas. Under assignments, there's an assignment called Abuse Survivor Stories. I'll actually go to the course calendar here. So, health, weekly agenda. We're in the second week. Here it says complete the assignment on Canvas. When you click on the assignment, it will open up and you'll open up this Google Doc. It says, today we learned about the different types of abuse. You will choose one of the types that was most interesting and read about an abuse survivor story. After reading their story, you will complete the following reflection questions. So you're going to choose one of the following types of abuse. We talked about different ones today. Click the one you're most interested in learning about. When you open one of the websites, I'll just do this one for example, it's going to have a bunch of stories of people that were abused. So you can choose which story to read and click on it, and you'll be able to read about what happened. And then you'll just quickly answer the questions. What abuse did you choose and why? What happened in the story? What was the end result? How did they get help? How does it make you feel? How did you feel for the victim? What surprised you? And then what should the punishment be for the abuser, so the person doing the abuse? If you have any questions about abuse in general or about this assignment, reach out to me. Once again, I'm sorry this video is so long. Hopefully you sped it up to make it faster. All right, thanks guys.